newspaper stated that the Western intelligence handed out the Turkish authorities a list of about 5,000 people who are likely to join al-Qaeda-affiliated armed terrorist groups in Syria, setting off from Turkey. Fears of a humanitarian and ecological disaster in Aleppo as a result of the continuous week-long cut-off of drinking water by the terrorists. As-Sisi takes an oath of office as President of Egypt. Good afternoon, welcome to our news bulletin. I'm Dania Nizam. President Bashar al-Assad received a letter of congratulations from the President of Nicaragua, Daniel Ortega Saavedra, on the occasion of winning the presidential elections. President Ortega asserted that he, and on behalf of the Nicaraguan people and government, highly appreciate President al-Assad's efforts for enhancing stability and peace, and also appreciate the special example of Syria that makes it among the countries which encourage a world where dialogue, solidarity and integrity prevail. President Ortega added that the elections and the victory of President al-Assad confirmed that the friendly Syrian people have a peace-loving spirit. Congratulating Syria and President Bashar al-Assad on the occasion of winning the presidential elections, Patriarch Gregorius III Lahham of Antioch and all the East for the Roman Orthodox sent a cable saying that he shares the voices of all the Syrians and he takes his place among the rings of people celebrating the victory of Syria everywhere. Patriarch Lahham said that the challenges that face Syria require Syrian and global solidarity for reconstruction and for launching a quick and effective program by the government to restore confidence and hope to the citizens. Prime Minister Dr. Wael al-Halaqi stressed that the Syrians made their decision in the presidential elections by holding to their homeland and their insistence to confront terrorism and its supporters. Al-Halaqi considered during his meeting with the Peasants' Union's delegation that the farmers are the main core of food security in the Arab world. On its part, the Peasants' Union's delegation stressed that Arab farmers stand by Syria in confronting the nation's enemies. As the delegation members clarified that President Bashar al-Assad is always in the heart of each citizen, and that is why he has the respect and support of its people. They also considered that targeting Syria is targeting the Palestinian cause and all the Arab causes, hailing the Syrian government in supporting the agriculture sector and the farmers in Syria. President Bashar al-Assad received several cables of congratulations from many parties, bodies and Syrian expatriates leagues across the world. The congratulating cables were sent by head of the Democratic Liberal Party in Belarus, the Serbian Gathering for Promising People, head of the Bulgarian Social National Movement, head of the Organization of the Civil Initiative, Bulgaria Against the War on Syria and Iran, as well as by the head of the Ukrainian Social Progressive Party, in addition to a cable by the Deputy Secretary General of the Muslims Union Unity Council in Pakistan. Cables were also sent by head of the Cuban Arab Union and by president of the United Syrian Club in Santiago in Chile, as well as by the League of the Syrian Expatriates in Ukraine and the National Committee for Syrian Expatriates in Netherlands. Assembly Speaker Mohammed Jihad al-Lahham met with the Belgian parliamentary delegation which came to support Syria against terrorism and its supporters. Al-Lahham stressed that the Syrian people said their word in the presidential elections and no one in the whole world has the right to interfere in its internal affairs. Al-Lahham asserted that Syrian government's determination to fight terrorism and restore security and stability. He clarified that the victories of the Syrian Arab Army in its war against terrorism made the change in the public opinion, whether European countries which support it started to fear its repercussions on its lands. The Belgian delegation stressed its support with Syria, its army and people who are facing this war under the cover of democracy and freedom.
We saw, of course, the elections. We saw that there was a massive turnout from voters. That were millions and millions of Syrians voted, more than 90%, I believe, but almost 90% for Mr. Assad. This means that Mr. Assad is the legally elected president of Syria, and that the people support him. So that is what we could see here, and this was not what was in the Western press. Again, they are very blind when it comes to looking at the situation like it should be. They are ideologically blinded by the way, let's say, the Americans and Saudi Arabia and Qatar try to influence the way the Syrian people have to live. A lot of these people are coming to fight against the Syrian people with the terrorists from al-Nusra, al-Qaeda and all these groups. When these people return, then they will be a living time bomb for our own society. They will not only have destabilized Syria, but they will destabilize the world and Western Europe.
Elected Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi was sworn in as the President of Egypt at the headquarters of the Supreme Constitutional Court in Al-Ma'adi neighborhood in front of the judges of the court. Senior officials as well as President Adli Mansour took part in the official ceremonies of swearing in. In cooperation with the local Syrian Arab Army units have discovered and seized a store of various kinds of arms and ammunition in Yabru city in Damascus countryside. In Aleppo, and in violation of the basic human rights, armed terrorist groups have continued to cut off fresh water, depriving the people of Aleppo of their right to have fresh water, which would pose an imminent environmental and humanitarian crisis. The French The Express magazine stressed that the French authorities were trying to sue the French citizens involved in fighting along with terrorist groups operating in Syria. The magazine added that about 20 citizens were facing judicial cases on charges of cooperating with criminal gangs. The Daily pointed out that most of the cases were against French citizens who collaborated with criminal gangs that have relations with terrorist organizations. The French Libération newspaper published an article by researcher Mark who said that thousands of European terrorists headed to Syria to fight along with the armed terrorist groups. He added that the crisis in Syria has attracted thousands of European terrorists over the past 3 years. He concluded that the return of these terrorists to Europe is very dangerous and will last for several years. The Austrian Kronen Zeitung newspaper disclosed that about 50 Austrian terrorists returned from Syria to Austria, describing them as a time bomb that threatened the security of Europe. The Daily added that the Western governments became in direct confrontation with terrorism when they decided to send terrorists to Syria. The Daily went on to say that the Western governments began to intensify security measures to confront the danger of the terrorists returning from Syria to their homelands. The British Financial Times newspaper has unveiled that Western intelligence have provided the Turkish authorities with a list comprising the names of about 5,000 persons who might join the al-Qaeda-linked armed terrorist group fighting in Syria, taking Turkey as a launching pad to infiltrate to Syria. It added that Western governments and security officials were very concerned that these terrorist groups might pose a grave danger to the West in the future and that they may carry out suicidal attacks after they come back to their original countries. U.S. President's National Security Advisor Susan Rice admitted in an interview with the CNN network that her administration was offering fatal weapons for the armed terrorist groups fighting in Syria. Rice's statement came as news reports said that a U.S. plane landed in the Jordanian Al Mafra airport loaded with fatal weapons to be distributed to the terrorists operating in Syria. In Iraq, at least 17 persons were killed and 50 others were injured in 2 terrorist attacks in Diyali city. A police officer said that terrorists detonated a booby-trapped vehicle that was followed by a suicidal blast that targeted the headquarters of the Kurdish al-Ittihad party situated downtown. In Turkey, 2 protesters were killed in bloody clashes that erupted in Liege region, south of the country, between Turkish army and protesters who took to the streets to protest against a project of building new military posts in that part of the country. Eyewitnesses said that Turkish soldiers deliberately fired at the protesters, injuring 2 civilians. One of them was in a critical condition. With this, we conclude our news for today. After the break, I will continue with our economic and business news. Stay with me.